We're going to be talking about Dalek today.
Today we are talking about the Daleks.
I don't really care for this one. Edward likes it. I don't know how you feel about it, Nicholas.
That's a surprise. I don't know, I was getting into sort of a weird groove with this season. Like, this happens whenever I revisit Series 1, I think, where I just expect the latter half to be as bad as I think the first half is. But, like, if I watch it in sequence, I'm like, oh, wow, these really don't hold up at all. But then as soon as we get to this episode, I'm like, no, this is actually pretty good. And I'm sort of torn on whether or not my viewing of it now holds up better or worse than when I did, because the last time I watched this was like 4 years ago for a written review, and that was back when I did number grades for episodes that I watched, and I gave this one a 9 out of 10. And I don't recall what my reasoning for giving it a 9 out of 10 was, but I don't think I would do that now. Then again, I also don't bother with number grades for anything now. Like, we'll get into it later.
It's Rose's fault.
Yeah. The only reason it wasn't a 10 out of 10 when I watched it any other time was because of Rose. And I have less of a problem with her now than I did before, but it's still a pretty big problem.
Rose's side so early on, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but I guess just if we're gonna open up with general thoughts, it's good. It's a very good episode with some very obvious problems.
If we're going by general thoughts, it has my favorite Ninth Doctor moment. Well, I was going to say his run, but then his run would just be the season. So,
Yeah.
Favorite Doctor moment of the season.
When I watch it, I don't know, it's just kind of boring and overly cheesy to me. I don't know. I have a very good counter argument for this because it should work for me, but it doesn't.
Like, I can understand finding it boring in a way that I could understand finding most of this series boring, in that it's like a lot of the episodes this season are set in sort of like cramped locations. We don't get out much. It's a lot of industrial buildings where we just sort of run around, and we got a very slow, methodical pace to things. I don't know. I think it's the setting in episodes like this that mainly make it feel boring. This season overall, we're a bit more colorful and a bit more frenetic in terms of visuals. I think a lot of the episodes would hold up better.
What this series as a whole is a victim of is just mediocre writing of Russell T Davies overworking himself here more than other series, because he writes episodes here than he does in any other series during his time on Doctor Who.
True, but he didn't write this episode, which is probably the main reason it's good. And, like, I can understand weird that we're just running away from the Daleks for half an episode, but at the same time, that Dalek is massacring everyone, and it's playing like a horror movie, and it's great.
Wants Rose dead as much as I do.
Well, I mean, it sort of doesn't, though, because
It does it first.
else, and then as soon as it gets to her, it's like, oh, that's like the first attempt it tries to kill her, and it can't do it. And so, like, I don't know enough about the behind the scenes of this episode. This might be just a little problem, or it might potentially be a big one, which is that I have no clue how this episode plays if you don't know what the Daleks are already going into it. Like, this has to be the very first time that tons of people watching this show ever saw a Dalek or heard of it. And this might be less of a problem if you live in the UK, because the Daleks are like such cultural icons that I imagine you're born knowing what a Dalek is. But this was not my first time seeing the Daleks, and I imagine if it was, I would not be nearly as emotionally invested as I am.
It wasn't my first time either.
My first time was with the 11th.
Yeah, like, I wish we had someone here who could speak to, like, what the experience is if this is your first encounter as a member of the audience with the Daleks.
This episode, if you haven't seen a Dalek before, it is effective because, like, they took a design that was outdated by the 70s and made it menacing again by showing you that it's got a shield that can melt bullets, and it can pretty much kill an entire army with no sweat at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's effective on that level of, like, this is just a creepy alien that's gonna kill everyone, but I mean, like, on the level of the pathos of, like, this is potentially the end of the Time War, the Dr. Dalek conflict that's been going on, like, heatedly for decades in previous episodes and audio stories and books. And, like, these are the guy, like, the enemy that the Doctor hates with a seething passion. And this episode is trying to play to that a lot, to the point where, like, I have to wonder if there was any point during the writing process where this was meant to be, like, the final appearance of the Daleks, as well as their first modern one, because we get them back at the end of this season. But I have to wonder if there was ever a point where during the writing process, do you have, like, behind-the-scenes...
Doctor Who Confidential, my Series 1 DVD set.
I never watched Confidential. You're gonna have to paraphrase.
Dalek's Return was almost canceled, but then it was like Who came back. The Terry Nation Foundation was like, right, Daleks have to appear on Doctor Who at least once a year, or the BBC is going to lose the rights to them.
Okay, I know about that, like, being a condition, but I didn't know that was always the case. So I imagine just, like, because of how this episode plays, I feel like, at least conceptually, whoever had a hand in writing this episode beyond just the one writer, I feel like someone had to be going, like, wouldn't this be a cool way to end this feud between these two sides?
They might have had the idea, but I really doubt that they would ever try to get rid of them.
Yeah, but to be fair, if that was the idea, I imagine it would be something that got phased out by the time you actually made it to filming. So a lot of that, I think, is just stuff like the direction and the music really playing up the pathos. And you might want to tone those things down if that was like your original intent. And then you realize going in, oh no, we're going to have these guys back this season.
Well, they might have just went ahead and filmed it the way they wanted to do it, just went with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a thing that'll happen in a lot of these episodes, and still happens, I think, to this day, especially with Stephen Moffat episodes, which we'll get to eventually, probably, where it's this phenomenon of this episode could potentially serve as an ending to a long-running storyline, but it isn't, but we're going to, like, play it up so that it has the emotional impact as if it were, even if that's undermined by the fact that it's going to show up again. Like, we've done that with the River Song how many times now? Feels like what we're doing with the Daleks, where it's like, so many episodes could be the final end of the Daleks, just the way that they're written, and it would be satisfying, but we keep bringing them back, and so you just have to ask yourself, is it okay for the context of this episode that it feels as emotionally big as it's trying to feel?
The main thing this episode is trying to get across is that the Doctor is too damaged by the Time Lord that he can't get past his obsessive hatred for the Daleks to move on, and that's more or less kind of baffling considering the history of the Daleks in classic show, where at one point the Time Lords sent the Doctor back to try to prevent their creation. The Time Lords, who swear to never interfere in anything.
So basically, like, what you're saying is that it's weird that we have the Doctor being, like, obsessively against the Daleks, and we're playing that as if it's weird for the Doctor, when that's pretty much been their relationship for the majority of their time together. It's like, take the Time War out of it, and the Doctor, he's not acting out of character at all in regards to how any other Doctor would treat the Daleks. And that's what makes it really frustrating when we get to the bit with Rose at the end. And should we just jump to talking about Rose? Because my other biggest problem with this episode is still her.
Either Rose or Adam, pick your poison.
Well, Adam's really not that big of a problem here, so he just exists here.
Yeah, Adam doesn't become an issue until the next episode. And a lot of the reason that Adam is an issue in the next episode is, again, because of Rose. He's just here to be set up for his point in the next episode. And you could argue that the actor isn't that great, because I remember, like, particularly at the very end of the episode when he's talking about how it's going to be filled up with cement, and he's, like, pleading with them to get out. The performance was not gelling with me then, but he seemed okay for the rest of the episode. And yeah, he really is just there. But the problem is with Rose, she's okay for the first half of the episode, because I remember, like, not liking her for most of this episode, but mainly because, like, she goes in, she frees the Dalek, but when you're paying attention, it's like, yeah, she doesn't know what a Dalek is. It's this alien that, as far as she knows, is just being enslaved and tortured. If this were any other species, the Doctor would be like, yeah, Rose, go help it. And so it's kind of good that she does that. And then it only gets weird when she has lines like, it was like looking right at me. Like, Did that part stick out as weird to either of you guys? Because whenever I watch this episode, I'm like, what is the point of that? Weird moment of us trying to get Rose to empathize with the Dalek before she's been given a reason to?
Pretty much.
The ideal way that you fix this episode is that you have, and I don't know how you could actually pull this off given like the running time, but ideally how you fix this is that you have the Daleks start to show genuine emotion toward Rose before she has that line. Like, here's how I do it. It tries to kill Rose, and then it can't, and she escapes, and then it keeps killing everyone else, and then it becomes sort of okay that you give Rose that line where it keeps looking at her, and yet it can't kill her. But as far as she knows, at that moment, it's just this duplicitous, murdering little thing. So it doesn't really make any sense that we give her that line before it then shows up and then can't kill her, where it's like, oh, it's growing empathy.
Using her again to get to more humans to kill, the sympathy manipulation that gets her to accidentally free the Dalek in the first place.
Yeah, that is a way to look at it. And I remember at some point watching this episode having that problem. But on this viewing, I'm like, yeah, but what can she do? She's sealed off from everyone else once we get to that point. And the Dalek is like, I can't kill you. Come with me. So it's like, what is she going to do? Either she's going to die or she's not. She's sealed off from everyone else. She doesn't really have any options.
Well, to be fair, he does kind of use her as, like, hostage at first.
Yeah. But again, what is she going to do to remedy that situation once she's in it?
And another thing, too, is just that Dalek doesn't show enough empathy growing or enough of a change to justify Rose being against the Doctor when he's ready to destroy it, deciding to not kill Stansted and instead decide to pity him.
Yeah, you nailed it right on the head in that there's not enough time. Where it's like everything with Rose is fine, probably better than I ever gave it credit for, until we get to that moment where it's her and the Doctor and the Dalek in one room, and she's like, the Dalek isn't the one pointing the gun at me. Doctor, what the hell are you turning into? It's like, Rose, what are you talking about?
A mass murder. It has not stopped killing the whole episode, and now the Doctor's the bad guy?
I get the idea. The idea, I imagine, as you're writing the episode, is the Dalek goes slowly from wanting to kill everyone to just wanting freedom. There's not enough time to do that idea service where it has Rose up against the wall. And at this moment, Rose has only seen it like mass murder people. And then it's like, oh, I can't kill you, but I really want to. And so she sort of paused. And so she's like, okay, what do you want? And it's like freedom. It's like, okay. It makes sense to assume that it's like values are changing a little bit. Like, okay, it's not just enough for Rose to be like, oh, it wants freedom. The very next scene, she's treating it like it's a victim, and it isn't. Like, yeah, it was a victim of torture, but it also killed everyone, and it was only just a scene ago that it was going to kill you and couldn't. Like, there needed to be like 2 or 3 scenes between Rose getting backed into that corner and the Doctor finding them where the Dalek expresses like some emotion or empathy or something. Because as it is now, it's like, oh, maybe it's sort of having some new ideas. Cut to the next scene and she's totally on its side and it makes no sense.
You think it would work better as a two-parter?
Yeah.
Proves my theory even more that single 45-minute episodes are just simply don't work at least 60 minutes for like pacing and laying all the ideas flush out so that they can work.
Well, it depends on the episode.
Yeah, it's a case by case.
Yeah, some episodes are barely making it to 40 minutes with the material they have, and then other episodes, they have a two-parter, and it's still not enough.
I feel like this isn't an issue of the episode not having enough time. I feel like this is an issue of the episode using its time poorly. Thematically, what I think this episode is trying to do, I would make it so that the Dalek, once it has Rose's sympathies, it gets out, like maybe it excuses the fact that it's killing everyone because it got tortured. Like make it so that it instead of it being like a simple trick on Rose to get out of the chains, make it so that it's like a long con. Where like the whole episode, it's sort of following Rose around and using her sympathies to its advantage. And slowly you imply that it's maybe starting to feel genuine. I like that we have moments where the Dalek is just massacring everyone and being an indestructible force of nature. But if you want the themes of this episode to work, you get rid of all that stuff and you make it where it's just sort of following Rose around and trying to escape peacefully to, like, use her.
Would you take out the museum guy that was collecting the aliens?
Oh no, I would keep him in. I would give him more to do. His final scene needs to be better. He's great up until the very last scene where it's just like, we're going to wipe your memories and drop you off somewhere. And like, yeah, it's a funny callback to what he said earlier in the episode. That is not the fate that you give to that character. I feel like what the whole episode is doing is that it's paralleling him and the Doctor and the Dalek, and that all three of them are characters who like have natures that they refuse to deviate from, even when people are pointing out why that's stupid. And because of that, they get into all sorts of trouble. Where the Doctor is like, if you trust that Dalek is smarter than you. It's by its nature, it's like duplicitous and dangerous, and it'll kill everyone. And I forget what triggers this line, but Van Staten has this line where he just says, in that case, I'll be true to myself and continue.
When he's torturing the Doctor, and the Doctor says to Van Staten, you know what a Dalek is? A Dalek is honest.
Yeah.
It was for the survival of its species. That creature in your dungeon is better than you.
Yeah, thank you for that line, because that whole scene, I think, is sort of setting up an episode-wide theme of, like, here are three people, or two people and a Dalek, I guess, will remain true to their natures at all times, even when it royally screws them over. And to really drive home that idea, I feel like we needed to do something with Van Staten at the end that wasn't so neatly wrapped up with a bow. Oh, isn't it great that the evil businessman got his comeuppance? Eden brought up a great point, which is that I feel the more satisfying end for that character is you let him live with what he did and maybe see how, if at all, it's changed him. But no, instead we do this sort of like, because it feels too much like a Saturday morning cartoon villain thing.
It's sloppy.
It feels like whoever wrote the episode, and I feel bad for not remembering the writer's name, or being too lazy to look it up. But I feel like the writer, when they got to that scene, was like, we just had a really heavy episode where a creature just killed tons of people and then killed itself. We need something that's sort of like full in a really black and white moral sense of like, this guy did bad things, now he's going to end up a junkie on the street. Let's all applaud the fact that he got like the really simple comments rather than doing anything thematically interesting with it.
Well, at least he's not an RTD Series 1 villain that's in it for the money.
Yeah, that is sort of weird because you'd think that, like, given the circumstances, that would be what they do with it. The way the actor is playing it, and I like this actor and I like this performance, he's really, like, genuinely charming. He has this thing where he has to get people to laugh at his jokes at the beginning of the episode. I get in that instance because that's like a corny pun. Like the reason you would laugh at that is because it's bad. But I don't know, I feel like the guy who like until he fires you, until you get on his bad side is really cool to work for. The guy at the beginning like says one thing to set him off and he's like, fire him, get him out of here. But I feel like if you stayed on his good side, the way this guy is delivering these lines, you would actually sort of be down with what he's doing.
Even on his good side, he's still a kid.
He's a kid, but he had benefits, so they put up with him.
Now,
yeah,
for me, it's like two main heavy-handed siding with Rose and the underdevelopment of the villain. And for me, everything else about the episode is good.
I don't even think it's a matter of underdevelopment. I would just change that last scene into something else.
Christopher Eccleston shines once again as the best part of this episode.
Definitely, and Eden is here now so she can gush about that.
Eccleston's performance in this episode is the best and amazing and amazing and the best. I was legitimately crying during the scene where he goes into the cage and like interacts with the Dalek.
Yeah.
There were actual tears in my eyes.
Everyone always points to the why don't you just die bit, and that is a great moment. Decided not to write down the one line that really got to me, where it's when he's talking to the Dalek and he's facing the camera, and the Dalek says something, and his response is to just laugh. And he makes, like, funny comment, or, like, he puts on a voice or something, and I forget what the line is.
He starts yelling that they're not the same, then he just starts saying, yo, wait, maybe we are. Maybe I have a point, because I know what to do. I know what should happen. I know exactly what you deserve.
The most like brutal scene.
It's not that moment though. I forget what the line was. I should have written it down, but it
Oh wait,
was
I know what it is. It's like when he's mocking that it's like they caught his and I caught your little signal.
yeah.
Help me, poor little
Yeah,
thing.
that was my favorite delivery of the episode.
It was like where the Dalek says, and the coward survives.
Yeah.
Where he essentially called the Dalek a coward, and that kind of pissed him off.
For that one moment, it's like he's talking to a child, and it's like it's the one scene where he goes from just being angry to being like condescending angry.
There is one scene in this entire season that makes me wish we had more Christopher Eccleston. It is this scene.
If there's anything I'm learning from this live stream, it's that I don't have to take notes for quotes anymore. I can just go to Edward and he'll know every quote.
He knows it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Trivia bad.
That scene was my favorite of the episode. This isn't like a problem with the episode. This is just the thing where like whenever I see character parallels, I instantly just want those characters in a room together for a scene. I just want Van Statten, the Doctor, and the Dalek to have like a three-way conversation instead of what happens, which is the Doctor and Van Statten take turns talking to it. I want them to just be a conversation between the three of them.
I didn't like Van Statten.
Yeah, we talked about him. I like the actor's performance. I really
The acting itself is fine. I know he's supposed to be insufferable than he was supposed to come off as.
I got like an early Tony Stark without
Right,
any of the human decency
That's
vibe
exactly
from
what
him.
I was thinking. You exaggerated the negative parts of Tony, and then just made that the character, and then like got rid of all redeeming qualities.
So essentially, Van Statten is Tony Stark if they casted someone other than Robert Downey Jr.
Because even in the beginning of Iron Man, Tony has some good qualities.
Like his friendship with Rhodey.
Like he likes Rhodey and Obi and Pepper, and he has at least those three relationships going for him. Van Statten is like that if you removed any like human attachment at all. And where it's like, and you brought up earlier that he's not motivated by money, which I really like, where he and the Doctor have that conversation where he's like, I wanted to touch the stars. And I feel like he at least really believed that about himself, or like the one semi-decent quality you could say that he has is that he's genuinely interested in the stuff he collects. But I mean, like, he doesn't just collect it because it's going to net him big bucks. Like, when the Doctor shows him how to work that musical instrument, he's like, oh, it sounds wonderful. And, like, he plays it, and he's actually pretty good at it. Like, he seems really happy that he was able to even work it.
Yeah, but then he throws it away.
He's like a little kid who sees stuff. They will genuinely love a new toy for about 5 minutes.
So he has a mind of a toddler.
At least he's not majorly in it for the money, and that's the only motivation Mike with Cassandra and the end of the world, and the Slovene, horribly dated CGI creature just likes controlling everybody for some reason.
One other thing that I wanted to like point out was near the very end, after the Dalek blows itself up, where the Doctor just says, I win. Like he and Rose are at the TARDIS, and he's like, would you look at that, I win? That's sort of really sinister, knowing that the Time Lord Victorious happens later.
He says he wins in a very mockery way, like he's not happy about it.
Yeah, but it's like it does sort of give you some insight to like he is, at least on some level, thinking of the Time War as a competition where he survived because he's the strongest. And that like informs a lot of stuff with him, especially when he becomes 10.
I want to bring this up when I have the chance. Anybody else bothered that Rose and Adam don't just run straight to the Doctor?
Wasn't that what they were trying to do?
But, I mean, they keep stopping and watching them, all these soldiers and die.
Well, you want to keep track of where the Dalek is.
Well, they already know. And I remember they had a tracking device on it or something.
Yeah, typical TV cliche that always they're being chased, they have to look back every 5 seconds. No, just keep running.
I mean, but to be fair, when I'm being chased by stuff, I do that because you want to keep track of how far away from you the thing is.
But they're not just doing that. They are literally just stopping and watching.
I mean, yeah, you don't want to stop to have conversations, Like, you just want to look back and then keep going, but they stop to, like, have that conversation about how, oh, it looked at me.
That bugs me. It's just like, okay, I get that they want to take a look, but after the look, they should just kept running. And then it leads to them getting stuck, or Rose getting stuck anyway, and being hostage.
Yeah. One thing that could have really fixed this whole episode, because it is a good episode, but the one thing that could have really done it is if maybe we'd done a little bit less admiring the carnage as the Dalek massacres people, and a little bit more of Rose coming around on it. She goes from, oh, this thing could have killed me, to being really smiley and like, you made it. When it opens up a way for itself to get out, she smiles at it and is like, you made it.
Yes, it doesn't feel right.
She goes from one end to the other in, like, less than a scene.
Yes, the emotional impact doesn't really mean anything because we're not seeing it. It's just you go to one extreme to the next extreme.
But at the same time, so much of the appeal of this episode, I think, at least on some level, is let's watch the Dalek massacre everyone and look really good while it does it, because it is a really good effect.
And it genuinely scared me when I was a kid watching this back in 2006.
Like, the only time I would say that Dalek effects ever look bad is when we're doing, like, hundreds or thousands of them at a time.
I love the Daleks.
I like that one, shut it.
Because Asylum was literally, they just had hundreds of Dalek, like, practical Daleks standing in one place. If they're standing around, it's fine. When we get to certain finales where it's like Daleks flying en masse through the sky and stuff, that's when...
Like Flirting of the Ways and Journey's End.
Yeah, that's when they start to look really CG. But here it's just one Dalek in the rain, so you get a little bit of leeway on why it looks super shiny, and it's just, it looks really good. It's just a good effect.
Does it bug anybody else that they kind of had to water them down after this?
Yeah.
They don't really water them down for like a while because like kill almost everybody in the finale.
On the one hand, though, when I really think about it, I can excuse that, because when there's Daleks, like tons of them, then they have a hierarchy where they have a leader. And because the whole point in this episode is like, give me orders, I need orders. So when you have a Dalek that will give hundreds of other Daleks orders, some of that will be like, round up prisoners instead of kill everyone. Survey the perimeter or whatever. Like, give them stuff to do that isn't just blindly massacring. Whereas here, we've got one Dalek with no orders and is just going off rage and blind instinct to kill everything because that's all it has left.
They shouldn't have made it so powerful at first. I think this is a case of they wanted to make it super powerful for its first outing, but then they kept bringing it back.
You know what you're saying? Like, it seems like we made it seem difficult to take out one Dalek here, whereas we'll make it seem really easy to take out several thousand of them later.
Daleks don't really get nerfed until Series 4, where like all of the companions are just pushing them around, destroying any integrity.
I get the problem. They probably didn't think they would have to have them in every year.
The reason I hesitate to call it nerfing them is because the Doctor and the Dalek aren't on screen together. They're like not in the same room for 90% of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And once they are on screen together and the Doctor has a weapon, the implication is one shot from that weapon was going to kill this thing stone dead. So, like, it only seems dangerous, like, as dangerous as it does because it's in the room with only humans for so long. When we see him take that gun, he seems pretty confident that it'll, like, just kill it. I guess basically what I'm saying is that there's, like, this perception where it's like the Daleks became consistently nerfed after this episode because look at how much damage one could do, when really it's a matter of circumstance.
Fair, he was going up against, like, just regular bullets and stuff, and the Doctor did have an alien gun at the very end, so...
Yeah, I mean, to the
That's what
Dalek, like, ordinary human soldiers are just tin cans.
So much of this episode is the Dalek just going against humans, whereas so much of other episodes where they'll be perceived as weaker is them just going up against the Doctor, and human weaponry will still seem really, like, completely ineffectual.
You know, you can't have something too powerful or it just becomes too hard to write for, or you can't have millions of them on screen if you can't kill one of them.
Let's talk about Adam.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we should talk about Adam, but the issue is I'm not sure I really have much to say about him, like more than I already did. The actor's performance is kind of meh, and he's just sort of there. I feel weird about how they do Rose, where it's like, because the person who wrote Dalek isn't the same guy who wrote The Long Game, and I feel like there was no communication between the two of them.
Long Game is written by Russell T. Davis.
Right. So I feel like Russell had a plan for Adam that was not set up as well as it could have been by Dalek.
Or maybe it could have just been an actor problem.
Like, my main thing about Adam is just that, like, in Dalek, he and Rose just sort of flirt. The very first scene of The Long Game is the Doctor calling Adam her boyfriend, and Rose is like, not anymore, where it's like, okay, so we just forgot about Mickey again. I guess Rose and Adam agreed to become boyfriend and girlfriend between these two episodes.
I think the Doctor was just messing with them personally.
Talk about Adam strictly in this episode.
He just exists in this episode, so it's kind of hard just to talk about him in this one. That's like he brings up The Long Game.
The reason it's hard to talk about him without taking The Long Game into account is because The Long Game is where it becomes clear what the purpose of his character is. Adam is the way that fans perceive Adric, where, like, he's too clever by half, his values are in the wrong place, he's a bit of a snot, and so he, like, gets dropped immediately.
Just to mention, I really love Adric.
I understand what Russell was trying to do with, like, showing that not everyone is qualified to be a companion.
What he does in The Long Game, I don't think is nearly a big enough deal compared to what some other companions have done and compared to what Rose will do to get immediately dropped. If we were gonna paint him as the kind of guy that you don't want on the TARDIS, Dalek needed to build toward that.
Well, was it really that bad? I mean...
It wasn't. And the issue is, I could be led to believe that it was that bad if this episode built to that, but it doesn't. He just seems like a normal, generic guy in this episode.
Yeah.
So when we get to the next one and he's supposed to be this cautionary tale, it doesn't fly because none of that was made apparent by anything he did or said in this episode.
Better off being just a side character in this episode and not becoming a companion at all.
Yeah.
I would say cut him from either episode, honestly, because he adds nothing. What he adds to The Long Game doesn't make any sense, and he doesn't add anything at all to this episode.
He just wastes time very much.
I feel like a lot of the problems that we have with, like, there not being enough time between Rose and the Dalek or Van Statten's ending being kind of weird could have been fixed if we got rid of Adam. It's just like, I don't understand why he's here at all. He could have been introduced in The Long Game, saying that is his only purpose, is that he's not to be a companion. Like, that's all there is to talk about with Adam, because he's just a generic guy in this episode.
Final thoughts?
I like it a lot.
I like it a lot. It's got problems. The thing with Rose wouldn't be such a big problem if it was in a different scene, because that is the scene that is supposed to make this episode. Like, the two scenes that are supposed to be the point of this episode is the Doctor and the Dalek in the cage, and that's brilliant, and the Doctor and the Dalek in Rose, and that's really not brilliant. So you could argue that, like, the emotional core of this episode only half works, if that. But I feel like in other areas it's just so effective that I can't call it not a good episode.
It just doesn't click with me.
8 out of 10. Christopher Eccleston gives his best performance yet, and damn it, Rose.
Yeah, this is where the Rose problems start. She's been a better character than I remember her being in at least some of these episodes. Like, still not good, but not nearly as worth as much vitriol as I give her, at least for this season. I don't think she's even remotely redeemable in next season, but we'll get to that. So I guess Father's Day next. Then, this has been fun. Bye.
See you in the future.
See ya.